Number 49, Charlotte Ann Mounteback by Julia Thorley. Charlotte Ann Mounteback is that most modern of confections, the celebrity author, the former descriptor being more valid than the latter. She sits in the unnatural habitat of the bookshop, waiting to sign copies of the novel that bears her name. This autograph may be, well, the only part of the publication that can truly be said to have been written by her. The challenge of putting pen to paper is no doubt exacerbated by her inability to grasp anything, including, one suspects, reality, due to her fingers and thumbs having been extended beyond reason by lurid acrylic nails that bring to mind a rabbit in need of the clippers. In similar garish tone, inflated lips disrupt an implausibly taut face, resistant to the display of any emotion. Smoky eyes peer through spectacles worn to give the illusion of intellect, and further down, rigid bosoms plan their escape. From the top of her product-heavy hair to the tip of her expensive pedicure, the overall effect is of a creature moulded from plastic and then sprayed with fixative. Quite why she is well known, no one can remember. She is famous for being famous. However, that fame has opened doors, and despite having no discernible skills, she makes regular appearances on TV sofas and ludicrous contests where the only criterion for inclusion is to have a modicum of celebrity. She is, in fact, an artificial, shiny, manufactured, but most of all, lucky opportunist who hasn't let lack of talent get in the way of media attention. A book deal was inevitable, while others more worthy of the title writer struggle to achieve success. Miss Mounteback has leapfrogged to the top of the pile and gone straight to publication. Number 50, Mrs. Bugloss by Patricia Lesley. They called her Mrs. Bugloss because once upon a time she had been married. Now there was little hope. Her appearance was enough to scare the most determined terrorist. Hair drifted in the region of her scalp like immeasurable mist below which a face hung badly. Eyes drooped like bat wings at dawn, unfocused. Nose pointed the way down for a line of compression, otherwise known as her mouth, and indeterminate chin was lost in waves which flooded the neckline of her shabby t-shirt. Mrs. Bugloss's height, compared with a broom handle, was short. Her arthritic joints sagged this way and that, like gnarled branches of an ancient thorn tree. When walking in town, she leaned on a stick, which she raised like a conductor's baton, but without harmonious effect, of course, against anyone who stupidly loitered in her path. If you asked why she never changed her clothes, she would answer, "Why, because I'm saving time and money." The smell, which drifted away from her on hot days, did much to preserve her solitary status. However, if anyone had occasion to confront her with an unreasonable demand, she was well able to defend herself. There was one and only one occasion on which she was unfairly treated by the man who collected insurance money. "How dare you accuse me of failing to pay?" she hissed at the scrounging lounger on her doorstep. "I doubt if you have the ability to count from 1 to 10. That's why I gave the money to your wife. At least she won't spend the precious pounds on beer. Now get lost before I throw this bucket of water over you." "Pay online, Mum," pleaded her daughter on learning of the encounter, but that meant laundry as far as Mrs. Bugloss was concerned. Number 51, Alexander Kerfuffle by Peter Herron. He had the appearance of a man who had accidentally fallen into his clothes while his mind was on other things. His shoes matched, though it was a matter of debate whether his socks ever did, or whether his shirt had been buttoned correctly, or whether his legs would become tangled in his tie, and he would career into his position at the dispatch box, head first, his blonde hair flailing around like a misbehaving pony. Alexander Kerfuffle was handed his brief by the permanent secretary, Sir Quentin Allballs. "Shan't be needing that," Kerfuffle said, absent-mindedly crumpling the sheets and trying to stuff them into his suit pocket, but missing completely. "I have it all up here." He tapped the side of his considerable head, almost poking himself in the eye. "Stop the NHS, save yourselves," something like that. Allballs blanched. Kerfuffle winked at the policewoman holding the door handle and flashed a smile. She went as red as the PS was white. The door opened and the Prime Minister burst out of number 10 like a bag of cats. He brushed at his suit, a last-minute check that it was on the right way, at least, and eyed the press corps. Cameras flash, frightening his hair, which tried to jump ship and scuttle back into the safety of number 10. He reached the lectern and gripped it like a prop. Facing the scrum in front of him, his deepest blue eyes scanning left and right, his jaw twitching in anticipation of the exchange to come. A short silence. Then, "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen." He tapped the notice in front of the lectern. "Stay at home, protect the NHS, save lives. What don't you understand about that?" He looked up and grinned. Number 52. Bloncket, Drabstone by Dennis Bruce. Greyness was Bloncket Drabstone's indistinguishing feature and fate. It came as no surprise to his progenitors, known to all and sundry for their lack of imagination and vitality, though Mrs. Gamp expressed rather colourfully her horror and shock at the mewling infant she hauled into the light with its pallor and thin cries. Through the years, and even to this day, he has developed and retained the camouflage created by the backgrounds of the tenements housing the poor and the ill-fed. He seemed to merge seamlessly into such environments where colour drained from the surroundings, and those who met him found it difficult not only to recall his name, but also had to be reminded who he was when he unfailingly reintroduced himself. That was indeed a drawback for them, but a boon for his business, where he spent his happiest hours clearing out the grim attics of those who had gone on to their eternal reward. For this kind of anonymity, relatives were grateful to recompense him in the most grieving moments. Born in the same dwelling as Sam Weller, he was the twilight to Sam's bright daylight. His apprentices he obtained from Bumble's orphanage. Every time he ventured forth to take on any new lad, poor Bumble had to be reminded of Drabstone's name and the reason for his visit, both of which he was selflessly happy to furnish to oblige the beadle. This shy, retiring, and apparently invisible personage lived a well-earned and unheralded life in bleak houses, where the scythe of the grim reaper had left its mark, whereas Bloncket Drabstone failed to make any impression upon those who struggled to remember his presence, which was, in fact, more of an absence. It could be that Bloncket is living somewhere near you today, but just like the air you breathe, you will not notice him until you really need him. Number 53. Justin Harmway by Aymeric Fromentin. Mr. Justin Harmway's habit of knitting a patchwork of souvenirs on his backpack had somehow washed over his own person. Just as his backpack carried the flag of many country visited, a gig attended, or a sports club supported, his tattooed and sunburnt skin told the story of the full moon parties, the teen heartbreak, and the midfield career. He was a lean and somehow slouching silhouette, as if his choice not to opt for a stable life had damaged his ability to maintain a balanced posture. It was, in fact, years of carrying school bags, sports bags, and backpacks had moved his vertebrae out of their axis. His phone had been connected to Starbucks Wi-Fi networks across 4 continents, yet he still felt like there was no north on his compass. All the walking, running, hiking, tramping, tripping, trekking, wandering, jumping, climbing, and swimming in mountain streams had sharpened his muscles like hills of blackened earth. His facial features were neither bland nor marked, and depending where the light source was, he could look alternatively handsome or sleazy, which caused him concern whenever he struck up a conversation or posted on social media. Middle-class Western upbringing was the only thought sparked by close examination of his face and attitude. His tied-back hair and fashionable stubble had started to show an early shade of grey, which he found convenient to counterbalance the otherwise youngish, immature image that seemed to follow him around. He was common as a plane ticket, yet could be fascinating, like a Punamu souvenir. Or so he was, until he found himself in a day and age of closed borders, where his whole appearance screamed disease-carrying, selfish backpacker. Number 54. Beatrice Ramsbottom by Sarah Treweeks. Beatrice Ramsbottom exhaled as the cold breeze tickled her tonsils. It was that lovely time of day just before the sunset, when the world is neither one place nor the other. That lull in proceedings when anything seems possible. All the days were pretty similar since lockdown, but Beatrice's were much the same regardless of any global pandemic. She was taking her daily exercise, one brisk walk around the block from her home and then back again. Her footsteps were brisk, slightly anxious. Her outfit of tweed trousers and ankle boots belied her age, as did her short grey hair. She walked closely by the railings of other people's gardens. Somebody waved at her, but she didn't respond. Her eyes focused ahead, or otherwise sidled to the pavement, which was glistening with changing atmospheric conditions. It startled her, but she continued on her journey with purpose. She was an imposter out here. She wondered if the world knew, if the birds singing in the trees could tell. She wasn't afraid of the virus. She was afraid of people, social expectation, judgment. People always felt she was courageous, having lived through the trauma she had. But surviving that had taken a toll, a heavy price to pay, and that price had been agoraphobia. The COVID-19 outbreak had changed so many lives. Their civil freedoms had been curtailed and put inside their homes. Beatrice had already been there for years. Doctors hadn't cured her, but lockdown had. The world was peaceful now, quiet, and venturing out had seemed more attractive proposition. Beatrice dreaded the hustle and bustle returning, but was determined to build upon her progress. One should experience true terror for no reason. Coping with a real one was less daunting somehow. Others being locked up had set her free. Number 55, Atlas Dissect by Wilma Cairns. Atlas Dissect's parents could not have said with any conviction where their son had been conceived. They gaily travelled the world, living without the constraints of contraception, hence their son's name, for surely he had had to be conceived somewhere. As Atlas grew up and was internationally schooled, developing a first-class brain, the world became his oyster, and he, like his parents before, discovered a love of travel, sharing his gifts and skills with those he met. On first acquaintance, Atlas was the image of a cheeky, chubby cherub with rich ruby-red locks that lay in curls like a halo round his angelic head, a red-veined beaky nose, only forgiven by veneer-enhanced, picture-perfect teeth he had had done on one of his numerous trips abroad, and eyes the colour of burnished brown. But appearances could be deceptive. A rotund figure whose head continually spun as if on a globe, settling on this conversation, listening to that piece of gossip, hoping to hear something that could be used to his advantage. Atlas was a chance-taker. He roamed the world looking for every opportunity that presented itself by fair means or foul, using his vast entrepreneurial skills to wheel and deal in a world subjecting itself to worsening degrees of self-gratification, deceit, and greed. At every watering hole he relished eating in, at every enlightened meeting he attended, he was surrounded by hangers-on, faceless, futile morons who worshipped the God of all that was attainable at a price, happily supplied by yours truly. Every cloud does not always have a silver lining, though. In every town, every city, every country he travelled through, they were soon to discover that Atlas Dissect was a super-spreader, and his travels were to have dire consequences in a 21st century world gone awry. Welcome, COVID-19. Number 56, Gabriel Roy by Fiona Quinn. This man's weight bore the life traumas that increased his frame. Big, overshadowing giant of a man, yet would take seconds, which would feel like hours, to manage to utter a word, a sentence, or even a sound. A loner, quiet, the world outside a scary place. Bullied, picked upon from a child to a man, forced to retreat from an unkind world. Big, bright clothes Mr. Gabriel Roy would wear. Size 12 red trainers his favourite. His farmer-like hands were raw from washing, yet the rest of his body smelt of dried-in spray. With a great mass of jet black hair, never daily washed, once a week was fair. Yet he donned the black mask and orange gloves ordered and posted to him when he stayed in his cage with his elderly parents, too frail to engage. Out the door he would go to get life's essentials for his dearest, clutching the scribbled-down shopping list on the back of a brown envelope, a bill of some kind. He wrote in capitals, never knowing how not proper that was. Yet who would care as he waltzed down the road, thinking out into the air that maybe, today, during this time, he is somebody, just once in people's eyes. Number 57, Franklin Swatteridge by Mark Burrows. Franklin Swatteridge comes to mind when I think of the strangest people I have known. His face, white-skinned and painful-looking, I can still see to this day. He lived at the end of our street, a quiet, tree-lined avenue. Franklin Swatteridge was best placed there. A bachelor, he would not fare well amongst people. Their very presence irritated him, and he irritated them. He was known for his early morning walks to the local newsagents, for his daily copy of the Times. Some saying he was rich, others saying he was a great pretender. He would wear a faded olive green smoking jacket on these jaunts down the avenue, although no one ever saw him smoke. He had the strangest fear of cats. He was seen to cross the road when one barred his way, and on braver mornings to kick one or two. It was said that as a child a cat, being tormented by an agitated Jack Russell while sat on a high wall, had launched itself onto Franklin's grease-thick black hair and had dug its claws in, staying there while he walked home. Car horns beeping at him as he walked tearful, a trickle of blood running down his cheek as the cat held onto his scalp for dear life, the dog still present. His mother, a stout Irish woman who had once been married to a man named Neptune Blood, had scolded him and torn the cat from his head, throwing it out of a window and sending the distraught lad to bed with no supper for acting the fool. Such was life. Curtains neatly closed, and door with the worn sign, "No Salesman." He became the avenue's greatest mystery. Exactly how Franklin preferred it. Number 58. Terry Crouch by Diane Silver. Terry Crouch was everything a son could be to those of a generous disposition who saw a man's sincerity and good heart as a badge of honour. "You don't know as you're born," his father Lawrence would say as he sat in his perfectly polished Chesterfield chair with the singed arm where Lawrence had let his cigar droop while in full oratory flow. "When I was your age I had nout," he pontificated through the small mouth that resembled a hen's posterior gently placed on a plump peach. To be fair, Lawrence Crouch had made good. From the small terrace of his youth with the outside lavatory, he had built a highly successful motor business, which meant that the young Crouches would never want for anything and could indulge their ideals. Terry, after the best education money could buy, dispelled the capitalist dreams of his father and wanted to make a difference, even in a small way, to the daily lives of the weak and vulnerable. And it was in this capacity that Terry decided to work in a care home. Arriving in an old part exchange Austin Mini from Lawrence Crouch Motors, Terry rang the doorbell and waited to be buzzed in. He swept back his floppy, carefree fringe as he waited to greet his charges. "Hello, love," said Doris. "How's my favourite boy?" Terry gave her a warm smile and took her delicate arm as if they were going for a walk on a breezy promenade. Doris had often relayed how she and her late husband Bertie would go to Brighton for the day when they were courting. Terry loved listening to old stories and would fix his kindly brown eyes on the narrator. For Terry, it was all about people, no matter what their story or their circumstances. He really was making a difference, and had every intention that one day, with his idealistic principles and the security of finding oneself in favourable financial circumstances, would make life better for so many others too. Number 59. Barbara Copeland by David Whewell. Barbara Copeland organises the customers waiting outside B&Q. In her lighter moments, she likes to joke that she is the B of the queue, and everyone laughs. She also supervises kitchens, bathrooms and plumbing supplies. When she's on customer sequencing duty, she stations herself at the automatic doors, feet slightly apart, and watches. The queue shuffles uneasily. She is severe of eye and manner, and takes the job very seriously, a peregrine falcon of the customer car park. Barbara, Barbs to the few who know her very well, is not a tall woman, but enjoys weightlifting and breeds German Shepherd dogs, her animals being much sought after by the military police. Breathless and self-consciously patient, the line waits, wary and watchful. They know Barbara, either through experience or reputation, and they know that any infringement of social distancing will not be tolerated, that it will be called out and no concession to any embarrassment. Care is required. Suddenly she's had enough of silence. She looks at no one but addresses them all. Everybody listens. "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you're here for more than a tin of paint. I'm a single mother, and if I die, my boy will be in a care home. He'll be an orphan. I'm putting my life on the line for your DIY. She adds, some might say unnecessarily, "So stay away from each other and stay away from me. 2 meters for those of you in any doubt. It's about the length of a coffin. Barbara now stares at them in turn and dares any defiance. None comes. Her tight-fitting orange pinny bristles with supportive outrage. The line doesn't know whether to murmur support or go home. They consider their options and the various risks. They all stay, though some decide to select a bigger trolley. That is when Barbara beckons them forward to indicate their time has come. Number 60. The Postman by Linda Allen. Obviously, it is necessary to leave the gate at the bottom of the drive open, as being confined to the house, with all the staff being on paid leave, I'm not able to totter down and open it for any callers. Sadly, there are not too many callers, and although Mr. Warble said he would pop along if I needed any errands, I'm sure he'd probably send young Jim, who, although a willing and friendly lad, does enjoy a pie or two more than is good for him. So I sit by the window or out on the veranda to watch the world during these troubled times. My dear and generous friend Mr. Touchcandle has offered the services of his manservant, Tom Better, but I know that he relies on him to such a degree that it will be selfish of me to deprive him, as, like so many of our friends, we are all in the same boat. I believe the term is confined to barracks, so I wait with eager anticipation. His appearance always results in the lifting of my spirits, sharply turned out in red with his hat at a jaunty angle. I know he will have visited everyone else in the village, and also been as cheery and positive with each of them. He is of average height, with an abundance of curly hair escaping from his hat. His rosy, glowing countenance just beams at the world, and not even his bushy eyebrows can dull the image. He's been our postman for many years, but unfortunately I do not know his name. This does not in any way lessen the relationship we have built up during this pandemic. Nothing for you today, Lady Selina. Just came to check you were okay.